They told you EVs would save you money. Free HOV lane access, no registration surcharges, cheap charging at home. Federal and state governments spent billions in incentives convincing you to go electric. Now those same governments are systematically dismantling every single promise they made. The federal $7,500 tax credit officially ended September 30th, 2025. California just terminated solo HOV lane access for over 465,000 EV owners. 40 states now charge EV registration fees up to $400 annually, and there's serious discussion about tracking every mile you drive and charging you for it. The bait and switch is complete, and if you bought an EV believing the financial promises, what I'm about to reveal will make you furious. This isn't about whether electric cars are good or bad for the environment. This is about governments making financial promises to push you toward expensive purchases, then quietly changing the rules once you've committed tens of thousands of dollars. The pattern is now undeniable. According to Congressional Budget Office data, EV incentives cost taxpayers billions annually. Those incentives drove adoption exactly as planned. EV registrations exploded. Manufacturers retooled entire factories. Millions of Americans bought electric vehicles based on total cost of ownership calculations that assumed those benefits would continue. Now the trap is springing shut. What you're about to learn comes from official government announcements, IRS guidance, and policy documents that reveal exactly how the cheap-to-run EV narrative is being systematically destroyed. 9 specific ways governments are clawing back every financial advantage they promised you. If you're considering an EV purchase or already own one and want to know what's coming, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because this information could change your buying decision entirely. And if you think your state is safe from these changes, wait until you see number 3 and help us grow this community by using the HYPE feature below. It gives this content an extra boost to reach more American drivers who need to know the truth before they sign finance agreements based on promises governments are already breaking. Let's start with the announcement that reveals exactly where this is heading. California confirmed that effective October 1st, 2025, electric vehicles will lose their clean air vehicle decal privileges for solo HOV lane access. EVs that currently drive in carpool lanes with a single occupant will need 2 or more passengers, just like everyone else. The program that had been operating under federal authority for over 20 years is officially expiring. The justification? According to California DMV data, there were over 465,000 active CAVI decals in 2025, a 52% increase over the 128,000 decals issued just in 2023 alone. Between 2019 and 2024, California issued nearly 684,000 decals total. The exemption that was sustainable when EVs were rare has become impossible now that adoption succeeded. HOV lanes in Los Angeles, San Diego, and San Jose have become overcrowded with single-occupant vehicles. Think about what this means. The incentive worked exactly as designed. People bought EVs partly because driving solo in the carpool lane saved significant commute time, while gas car owners sat in gridlock. Now that behavior change is complete, the reward disappears. A California EV owner who relied on HOV access for their daily commute faces new time costs that didn't exist when they made their purchase decision. For many Los Angeles and Bay Area commuters, this fundamentally changes the equation they calculated when choosing electric. But here's why California matters beyond California. The Golden State has become a policy laboratory that other states watch closely. The ZEV mandates, the emission standards, the incentive phase-outs. These policies tend to spread. When California proves that removing EV exemptions is politically survivable and fiscally necessary, expect other states to follow within 24 to 36 months. To understand why governments are turning on EVs, you need to understand the money they're losing. According to Congressional Budget Office figures, the Highway Trust Fund receives approximately $43 billion annually from federal gas taxes, 18.4 cents per gallon on gasoline, and 24.4 cents per gallon on diesel. That's roads, bridges, infrastructure, funded by every gallon of gas sold. Every electric vehicle that replaces a combustion car eliminates that revenue stream entirely. CBO projections show the Highway Trust Fund faces a cumulative shortfall of $181 billion for the highway account by 2033. If current trends continue, the federal gas tax hasn't been raised since 1993, and its purchasing power has eroded by over 50%. Governments aren't worried about EVs because of environmental concerns. They're worried because EVs represent the largest tax base erosion in transportation funding history. Since 2008, Congress has transferred $275 billion from general revenues to keep the Highway Trust Fund solvent. Every successful EV adoption undermines these revenue streams further. This isn't speculation about what governments might do. This is mathematics forcing their hand. The question isn't whether they'll replace lost gas tax revenue, it's how and when. And the answer is already emerging across America. Remember when EVs paid no special registration fees? That era is ending faster than most owners realize. According to the National Conference of State Legislatures, 40 states now impose special registration fees on electric vehicles, fees that didn't exist a decade ago. These range from $50 in states like Arkansas, Kansas, and North Dakota, to a staggering $400 initial registration fee in Texas, with $200 annual renewals thereafter. For a Texas EV owner, that's $400 the first year plus $200 every year after, costs that weren't in your original calculations when you bought the vehicle. And that's on top of standard registration fees that can range from $51 to over $800, depending on the vehicle. Georgia adjusts its EV fee annually based on a DOE formula, hitting $211 in 2023 and continuing to climb. Ohio charges $200 annually. Alabama charges $200. Arkansas charges $200 for full EVs and $100 for hybrids. West Virginia charges $200. Michigan uses a weight-based system, $140 for lighter EVs, $240 for those over 8,000 pounds. Washington State charges $225 annually when you combine their $150 electric car fee with the $75 transportation electrification fee. California, the state that proved EV adoption was possible, now charges $175 annually, indexed to increase over time. Some California EV owners report total annual registration bills exceeding $700 to $800 when combined with other state and county fees. And those registration costs are becoming the norm, not the exception. The pattern is consistent across red and blue states alike. Promise exemptions to drive adoption, then systematically remove them once adoption reaches critical mass. Here's what should concern every driver, not just EV owners. Federal and state governments are actively studying pay-per-mile road charging to replace declining gas tax revenue, and EVs are accelerating the timeline. The Federal Highway Administration has funded mileage-based user fee pilots in multiple states. Utah offers an optional program at $0.0111 per mile. Virginia charges EV drivers $0.0114 per mile through an OBD plugin. Hawaii launched its program in 2025 at $0.008 per mile or a $50 flat fee. Oregon's OREGO program has been testing this for years. The technology exists: telematics boxes, GPS tracking, odometer readings, automatic license plate recognition. The only barriers are political. Congressional hearings have examined road pricing as inevitable given fuel tax decline. AAAA has published extensive analysis on distance-based charging implementation. The question isn't if, it's when. What does this mean practically? Your car could be tracked every mile you drive. Rates could vary by time of day, road type, vehicle weight, and location. The concept of free roads disappears entirely. For EV owners specifically, this is particularly concerning. You bought a vehicle partly because driving was cheap. Electricity costs per mile were far below gas. Per-mile road charging could eliminate that entire advantage. If you pay 4 cents per mile for electricity and then 2 cents per mile for road access, your cheap-to-run EV suddenly costs more than a fuel-efficient hybrid. EVs have a physics problem that governments are beginning to exploit. They're heavy, much heavier than equivalent combustion vehicles, and that weight is becoming a policy target. The average electric SUV weighs approximately 5,500 to 6,500 pounds, often 700 to 1,200 pounds more than a gas equivalent. That extra weight comes from batteries, and it causes measurably more road damage. According to engineering studies, road wear increases exponentially with vehicle weight. A vehicle twice as heavy causes roughly 4 times the road damage. Several states are examining weight-based fee structures. Montana already charges different EV fees based on vehicle weight: $70 for standard EVs, $100 for those over 6,000 pounds. Oklahoma's fee structure also varies by weight. While this targets all heavy vehicles, EVs are disproportionately affected because their battery packs make weight reduction extremely difficult. A Tesla Model X weighs over 5,300 pounds. A Rivian R1S can exceed 7,000 pounds. A GMC Hummer EV tips the scales at over 9,000 pounds. These vehicles face the highest charges under weight-based schemes. The justification is logical. Heavier vehicles cause more infrastructure damage and should contribute more to repairs. But the effect is to penalize the very vehicles governments spent years promoting. The cheap-to-charge narrative assumed public charging would remain affordable. That assumption has proven catastrophically wrong. According to AIA and Kelley Blue Book data, public DC fast charging costs have climbed sharply over recent years. The average cost per kilowatt-hour at public fast chargers now ranges from 40 cents to 60 cents, with some networks and locations charging even more during peak hours. Electrify America typically charges around 48 cents per kilowatt-hour with their Pass Plus membership, while pay-as-you-go rates run higher. EVgo's peak rates can hit 64 cents per kilowatt-hour in some markets. Charge point prices vary wildly by location since individual station owners set rates. Let's calculate what this means. A typical EV with a 70 kilowatt-hour battery charging from 20% to 80% at a fast charger takes approximately 42 kilowatt-hours. At 50 cents per kilowatt-hour, a common rate, that's $21 for roughly 150 miles of range. A gas car getting 30 miles per gallon covering the same distance would use about 5 gallons, approximately $17 at current national average gas prices. The EV costs more to fuel than the gas car. Yes, home charging remains cheaper, around 17 cents per kilowatt-hour on average residential rates, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration. But this assumes you have a garage or driveway with a Level 2 charger installed. According to Department of Energy estimates, roughly 40% of American households don't have dedicated off-street parking. In dense urban areas like New York City, San Francisco, and Chicago, it's significantly higher, often over 60% of residents. These owners are entirely dependent on public charging networks whose prices have soared. The cheap-to-run calculation only works if you can charge at home, a privilege millions of urban Americans simply don't have. The purchase incentives that made EVs financially competitive are vanishing across America. The federal $7,500 new clean vehicle tax credit officially ended for vehicles acquired after September 30, 2025, under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. The $4,000 used EV tax credit ended the same day. The lease loophole that allowed commercial vehicles to bypass sourcing requirements closed on the same date. Before the deadline, vehicles had to meet strict requirements: final assembly in North America, battery component sourcing thresholds, critical mineral requirements, MSRP caps of $55,000 for cars and $80,000 for SUVs and trucks, and income limits for buyers. Buyers who delayed purchases expecting the credits to continue found themselves paying full price. Manufacturers who tooled up for credit-driven demand now face a market where their products are substantially more expensive relative to alternatives. Industry experts warn of a likely slowdown in EV adoption now that buyers have lost that upfront cost advantage. California's Clean Vehicle Rebate Project, which once provided up to $7,500 in state rebates and helped put nearly 600,000 clean vehicles on California roads since 2010, closed to new applications in November 2023. All funding was reserved for existing applicants. Georgia eliminated its generous EV tax credit years ago and actually retroactively attempted to claw back credits from some buyers who had already received them. Some state incentives remain. Income-qualified programs like California's Clean Cars 4 all still offer up to $12,000 for eligible buyers, but the direction is unmistakably toward reduction, not expansion. This matters for anyone calculating total cost of ownership. An EV that made financial sense with a $7,500 federal credit looks very different without it. The payback period extends. The comparison with combustion vehicles shifts dramatically. For many business buyers, EV tax advantages were the primary financial reason to choose electric. Those benefits are being systematically reduced. The Commercial Clean Vehicle Credit under Section 45W also ended September 30th, 2025. This was the credit that made fleet purchases and leases financially attractive, up to $7,500 for light-duty vehicles and up to $40,000 for heavier commercial EVs. Businesses that converted fleets based on tax advantage projections now face dramatically different economics. The lease loophole that passed federal credits through to consumers via lower lease payments has closed. Rental car companies learned this lesson painfully. Hertz, which bought 100,000 Teslas in 2021, reported a $2.9 billion loss in 2024, driven largely by plummeting EV values. The company was hemorrhaging over $530 per car monthly due to depreciation, high insurance premiums, and long repair times. They dumped 30,000 EVs at fire sale prices. Teslas bought for over $40,000 were listed for under $20,000. For business users who chose EVs based on tax advantages, the calculation looks increasingly different. Those advantages are disappearing. The final financial hit comes when you try to sell. EV residual values, once assumed to be strong, are proving weaker than many forecasts predicted. According to iSeeCars analysis of over 800,000 vehicle sales, EVs lose an average of 49% to 58% of their value within 5 years, significantly more than the overall market average. Some models are even worse. The Mercedes-Benz EQS loses approximately 48% of its value in just the first year. Several factors drive this alarming trend. Technology advancement means newer EVs have substantially better range and charging speeds, making older models less desirable almost immediately. Battery degradation concerns, whether fully justified or not, make cautious buyers wary of used EVs in ways they aren't wary of used gas cars. And the removal of purchase incentives means new EV prices have fallen in some segments, pulling down used values with them. A 3-year-old EV that cost $55,000 new might now be worth $25,000 to $28,000. Similar depreciation percentages to some luxury combustion vehicles, but from a higher starting price, meaning larger absolute dollar losses. For owners who calculated that strong residual values would offset higher purchase prices, this represents another broken assumption. The total cost of EV ownership, purchase price minus resale value plus running costs, plus fees, looks increasingly less favorable than the promises suggested. These 9 changes represent a systematic unwinding of the promises governments made to encourage EV adoption. HOV lane access disappearing, registration fees introduced in 40 states, gas tax replacement schemes being planned, weight-based penalties hitting heavy EVs, charging costs soaring, purchase incentives eliminated, commercial credits ending, resale values cratering. None of this means EVs are bad vehicles. The driving experience, the instant torque, the reduced local emissions, the lower brake and fluid maintenance, these advantages remain real. For some buyers, particularly those with home charging, short commutes, and genuine environmental motivation, EVs still make sense. But the financial case, the "it'll pay for itself" argument that drove so much adoption, is collapsing under the weight of policy changes and rising costs. The most frustrating aspect is the bait-and-switch nature. Governments didn't present EV incentives as temporary measures to kickstart adoption. They presented them as the future of transportation. Buyers made decade-long financial commitments based on cost calculations that assumed those incentives would persist. Now those buyers face costs they didn't anticipate, can't avoid, and couldn't have predicted when they signed purchase agreements. For anyone considering an EV purchase in 2026 or beyond, the calculation must change. Don't assume current benefits will continue. Don't assume public charging will remain at current prices. Don't assume registration fees won't increase. Build in substantial contingency for policy changes, because the pattern is clear. Governments giveth and governments taketh away. The EV free ride is officially over. Plan accordingly. Did you buy an EV based on financial promises that are now disappearing? Are you reconsidering a planned EV purchase after seeing these changes? Share your experience in the comments below. I read everyone. And if this video revealed information that could change your buying decisions or those of someone you know, hit that like button and subscribe For more content that cuts through automotive marketing to reveal what's actually happening to American drivers, help us grow by using the HYPE feature below. It gives this content an extra boost to reach more drivers who need this information before making expensive commitments based on promises governments are already breaking.